All right. Welcome to the Lubbock BEMA discussion group in Lubbock, Texas. Guess I didn't need to say Lubbock, Texas. I already said Lubbock. Tonight we are discussing Grappling with God, Part 1. Last week we discussed Isaac and how he kind of went back and in one chapter fixed everything that happened in Abraham's life, I guess. It's kind of what they were talking about a little bit. But this week we're going through Genesis chapter 25 through 31, but we're not going through 26 because 26 was last week. So the main question that we didn't really think to ask about Isaac was, why did God choose Jacob? We didn't really think to talk about Isaac, but Isaac was Abraham's son, so it didn't.
Yeah.
We didn't really think about it. It didn't really make any difference. It was just like, well, it's Abraham's son. Why wouldn't he use him?
Well, Abraham had one son, and Isaac had two. So he had two to choose from.
I just find it's funny, all this time, this work up to get Isaac for like 5 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
In the Bible.
Yep. I mean, he had an eventful life.
Yeah.
Went through and made some of the same mistakes, did some of the same things Abraham did with his benevolence, with his, what is it called? Hospitality. Mm-hmm. Found someone who was just as hospitable as Abraham to be his partner, his wife. Mm-hmm. And so Rebecca, Jacob's wife, gets pregnant and has twins. And the babies are jostling in the womb. I think they're fighting in the womb already. And she was worried about it, and it says she went to inquire of the Lord. So that was interesting to me, just that one phrase that you don't really think that much about, but she went to inquire of the Lord. Like, did she pray? Did she call upon his name like Abraham did? Is there...
Yeah, because they go through that really fast. What's interesting is it says she was barren, so Jacob prayed, or Isaac prayed, and then she conceived, and then this fight. So what went wrong in that prayer? One, that she would have this quarrelsome with inside. I don't know. I just think that's just interesting to note. Why would they mention that? What's the importance?
Yeah.
I don't know. I haven't developed a thought other than it's just an interesting little spot there.
So it definitely jumps out, like, what do they usually call it? You know, something that stands out.
It just sticks out.
Doesn't
It's
seem like
Bible,
something that needs
so
to be there, but it is there.
It says there. So what can I draw from it? I don't know. Maybe at 4 a.m. in a cold sweat will come to me.
Mm-hmm. The jostling in the womb reminded me when, Jesus and John were in the womb, and
John leapt.
Yeah, John leapt
her.
when Mary came in and she was pregnant. So it's interesting that they, mention that in those two spots. And so she inquires of the Lord, and the Lord said to her, 2 nations are in your womb, and 2 peoples from within you will be separated. One people will be stronger than the other, and the older will serve the younger. So that reminds me of kind of Ishmael and Isaac. Mm-hmm. Even though they're from 2 different mothers, the younger one gets the blessing, which happens later in this, but also Joseph is the one who, is the favorite of Jacob later on. So it's like it's always, even though they mentioned the Behor being the oldest son and the one who's supposed to carry on the responsibilities, and he gets a double portion of the inheritance, seems like God is always pushing for the younger one.
Yeah. Right. That's been the theme since the beginning of the stories from Genesis, when God chose Abel over Cain.
Yeah.
And then we see here the younger over the older. And like you mentioned, Isaac and Ishmael. Isaac was the second, even though God refers to him as the first. Mm-hmm. And so I don't know. I'm not sure what the story is, other than we'll get further into it, how God can take... we'll talk about it. God can do whatever he wants, basically.
Mm-hmm. It is his story. He's the main character.
Yeah. I do what I want.
Yeah. And I was just thinking of, Saul as first king. He was the logical choice. He was taller, he was handsome, bigger, stronger, and then David would take over, and he was just a shepherd boy. He was nobody, nothing, and so I see a lot of similarities here between Esau and Jacob, but I still can't get over it. I mean, could you? Why Jacob? Why a guy who was always grasping at his brother's heel and doing things in a behind the scenes sneaky, I mean, I look at this story and I go, man, that's just unfair. And I'm sorry if I don't want to jump ahead to the next paragraph, but when obviously Esau, he was manly, he was hairy for one, and said even from birth.
Yeah, covered in hair and red.
Yeah, that sounds like a cartoon or something that he would do, that I would see in one of your cartoons. And I could see Esau there in the delivery room, and he goes, "Well, he's Esau. He's red."
Mm-hmm. I imagine him looking like that monster from Looney Tunes. It was tall and red and hairy.
Yes.
Yeah. That Bugs Bunny would.
There you go. No
mess
arms.
with sometimes.
I know what you mean. And then here comes Jacob. And I see in the delivery. Here he comes. Here's hairy, red Esau coming out. And there's Jacob's hand holding on to his ankle. I said, "Wait a minute, wait your turn, bud." And the whole relationship with Jacob and Rachel, and that was just weird. And there are just certain things that if I didn't know that they were in the Bible, I would say, sometimes things are in the Bible doesn't mean they're right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It just means that's the way it happened.
That's what happened. Yeah.
It's not right, but rightly spoken.
There we go. It's a good way to put it, Steve. Yeah, I love it. But definitely, when it came between the two, God clearly chose Jacob.
Mm-hmm. They pointed out how Jacob was Rebekah's favorite and Esau was Isaac's favorite. And I was thinking about how, even though Esau was Isaac's favorite, Esau didn't have the desire to be the Behor, to fulfill his role as the Behor, and that's why, Jacob wanted it. I'm assuming with everything he had, because he was willing to do whatever it took to get it.
No matter what.
Yeah, because they made a point to talk about how, yes, the oldest got the double portion, but also they had a double responsibility. So maybe he just looked down on the responsibility, and
he wanted the portion.
He wanted the portion, but he didn't want the responsibility.
Yeah.
So when he gave up the birthright, he knew, well, hey, it's not my problem anymore. So, and that's why the scripture mentions that he despised the birthright.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I think that's probably the main reason. I think we'll get further into it, as why God chose Jacob. He wanted it.
Yeah.
It's kind of hard to. There's a saying: "Pursuit is the evidence of your desires. The things you pursue or the things you desire." You say you want something, but you're not willing to do anything about it.
Mm-hmm.
So this is an evidence that he wanted it. So he's willing to take steps, though they're questionable as far as ethics are concerned. But this is before the Mosaic Law.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of one of those things you have to ask yourself: how bad do you want it? And I think we'll see throughout the scriptures that people who wanted it, God used them.
Yeah.
God wants to use someone who wants to be used. He's not going to force you to do something.
Right.
That's why when I think of the scriptures, that when God gives you the desires of your heart, that means He's putting those desires in your heart.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's my thought as far as why did God choose Jacob? He was willing.
Yeah.
I was also sitting here while I said it too, and I'm listening, and agree with Stephen but we're saying over and over that God chose Jacob. Well, wait a minute. Didn't he kind of set it up with some help from his mother and this whole deception thing where he disguised himself as his brother, and then it was Isaac who gave him the blessing. Mm-hmm. So it's not like God told Jacob, here's what you're going to do. This is kind of what they did, but God definitely blessed it. He went along with it because he could have stopped it. Mm-hmm. He could have brought Esau back from the field, or something, and hey, what are you guys doing here? Trying to steal my blessing? But he didn't.
Yeah, he could have sent an angel to tell Esau.
Sure.
Don't go hunting today, or your brother's going to steal your birthright.
And
why didn't just God come out and straight and tell Isaac, okay, you need to bless Jacob as the head? That would resolve any need to. But I think this also shows a point that when God tells us, God promises us, we do have a part to play. Mm-hmm. Like I said, this is questionable as far as ethics, but we do have to realize that, God tells us, that He'll provide for us. It doesn't mean He's going to give cash. He could give you the job.
Yeah.
And so there kind of just shows that we also have to remember that we have a part, mm-hmm. our role to play in whatever God's doing.
Yeah, exactly. And definitely Jacob had the hunger. He had the mm-hmm. desire. And he took action to go after and get it, even though it wasn't his. But technically it was, because where Esau did sell him his birthright. Now, whether he meant it jokingly or not, but he said the words. They made an oath. Mm-hmm. He's out hunting and he's starving, and because that's what Esau did. Esau was a guy. He went out and he camped and he slept outside and he hunted and brought back fresh game, which Isaac also liked, and so then so there he is, the favorite. There's this whole favoritism thing, and whenever there's a favoritism being going on, it's never a good thing. And and the favoritism is all throughout here. We're even going back where we're not there yet. We're getting ready. I don't want to jump too far ahead to where Jacob chooses a wife, and then Laban does this whole switcheroo thing on him. But that's later. But but this whole favoritism going on, it's never, it's never good. And whether Esau just kind of blew it off, and what's good's a birthright if I'm starving to death. Mm-hmm. Boy, what you got in that pot there smells really good. I'll trade you. Or actually, it was Jacob who suggested it. Esau went along with it, and so technically, at that point, if we're really under a word of our honor, we're under an oath. Technically, it became Jacob's at that point. Mm-hmm. Because Esau, he didn't see the value in it at the time. He valued what was in that pot more than God's blessings.
Yeah.
But that's also part of human nature we fear the future, but we fear not having at the moment. With you've seen those videos where they put the dog food in the cup, and the dog chooses which hand, and the dog chooses the one that he saw because that's a guarantee.
Yeah.
Didn't think to take a risk and see if there's anything in this one, and it had a whole bunch. So I think that's just part of the human nature. This is a guarantee because this is what I have right now.
Right.
Not ever thinking about the future. Like, I got this little bit of money, and I need to I feel I need to pay the bills, or there's an opportunity to invest. This fear of not knowing the future. But thinking the future depends on the moment now. Mm-hmm. And so it's that fear of unknowing, releasing of what I have right now.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm going to go back to what the angel told her, because they brought up a good point. Did she never discuss this with Isaac?
Yeah.
And she never discussed that the older would serve the younger, and it never says that she did or didn't. I can only imagine how Esau coming out of the womb, Isaac seeing him, and loving him for the first time, and he's so busy with Esau and Jacob comes out that Rebecca gets Jacob, and so that's
the connection.
That's the divide right away at birth. I can imagine something like that, having had the experience of holding my own child after birth.
Yeah. And then what I find interesting is this foretelling makes me ask the question, was this a foretelling or was this a promise? Because it makes it two different things.
Mm-hmm.
Good point.
Because what if Esau never didn't trade it and said, I'm bigger, I'm going to take it? What if Esau never traded, or he found some food, or realized and didn't despise it? Would this change the story simply in the characters? No, it was just something that made me think. Because sometimes we read the Bible as promise and it's just record history.
Mm-hmm.
Or we think prophecy, when we think prophecy, we think down the road, hell, fire and brimstone. It's just telling them what was going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
Had nothing to. I don't know if it has anything to do with the promise, other than just a statement of facts.
Right.
Yeah, I imagine, we look at the story and we think so much about how deceitful Jacob was and how his mom helped and how deceitful she was in helping him. But it's like these people come from a long line of
deceivers,
people that do the same types of things. I don't know what Abraham's family was like, but I know what Abraham was like. Mm-hmm. Even from the story of him being in the shop, his dad's shop, and taking an axe to all the idols and then putting the axe in one idol's hands and saying, he's the one that did it. Like, it's kind of just this is in their blood. Like, they they're people who
family curse or
Well, I don't know if I'd look at it as a curse. It's just that's how they did things. I don't know how right or wrong it was back then. Obviously it hurt people because, when Abraham told them Sarah was his sister, they got pretty upset about it.
Yeah.
And then when Isaac did the same thing, they were like, you know what? Anybody who messes with this woman is going to be put to death. So obviously there are consequences to these actions. It's just
they haven't learned from those mistakes.
Yeah. At the time when we're in the moment, ideas seem right. And to people who are older than us, they know what's going to happen. Like, they can see the path that we're going down with this decision, and they're like, yo, that's dumb. It's easy for us to say the same thing because we've already seen the outcome. But in the moment, if we had never thought about it, and you're just like watching it unfold like a movie, like, what would that be like? Would I be on Abraham's side? Would I be on Jacob's side? Would I be rooting for him because he's the underdog? Yeah. And I was thinking about how the whole setup to steal his brother's inheritance is kind of like, it reminds me of, like, I was thinking about Ocean's 11. Like, if I were going to see this as a movie, the mom comes in to Jacob and she's like, you're supposed to rule over your brother. He's going to come in from the field, as he always does, and every time he comes in, he's ready to eat. And he's so ready to eat. And I wonder if he ever made the comment before to the mother, like, I'd give my birthright for some food right now. You know what I mean? So his mom is like, like they were saying in the podcast, I wish we had some of that back and forth that we don't get to see, like, filling in the gaps.
Sure.
Yeah, that was a thought I had. It was the providence. When I'm reading a book called Pathways, and it talks about God's sovereignty and how providence works, that God can work through what even our free will.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
The choices we make, God can make things work. So in my mind, I'm thinking this is also could possibly be that. Was this situation of selling the birthright, was this a moment created by God to turn things into the way He wanted it to happen? Was this God testing Esau, or was this moment created so Jacob could rise to the occasion?
Mm-hmm.
You know, so it's kind of a back and forth. Like I asked, what if Esau had passed this test? Would it just be his? Would it be God of Abraham, Isaac, and Esau?
Yeah, if Esau was like, no, I'd rather die than give my birthright, you know.
And with the birthright, one of the things I thought is when I did like my manhood study, the idea that this manly honor really comes from our Father, our sense of honor and pride and who we are and our last name, and you know, and so that birthright, that's what that was, you know, that manly honor, and then Esau giving that up,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and with that, that was my thought, that's where manhood and manly honor comes from.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was just thinking
It's Ray.
when I was
Ray's here.
About time.
when I was going through it, I was thinking how it, you know, if this was supposed to happen, the older would serve the younger. Could they have sat by and done nothing, and God would have worked through it anyway?
Right.
Right.
Did they have
You
to
know?
do anything?
Because Isaac didn't go to Egypt, and he still got wealthy.
Yeah.
Abraham went to Egypt and got wealthy,
Wealthy.
but it was through deception.
Yeah.
You know, so I don't know. And so he goes through, he steals his brother's inheritance. You know, we kind of talked about it a little bit already, but he went, while his brother was out hunting, his mom was like, you know, why don't you put this hairy garment on and go in there and give your dad this meal that I cooked, that's his favorite meal that, you know, Esau would have gotten for him, and pretend like you're Esau. You know, and how much does it play into it that he's blind, or that he can't see well?
Yeah.
You know, how much did God have a role in that, in having him not see well in his old age?
Right.
You know, so that he could pull that off.
Yeah.
You know, I don't know. It's just one of those things, like, how much is God's hand and how much is Jacob? I mean, faith-wise, I would say it was God, because he's the one that decides everything.
Okay.
And just like you were saying, no matter what happens, he can work through it.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter what we do.
Kind of makes me with that scene where Jacob was just in there playing his game, whatever, and the mom comes, hey, put this on, take this out. And the mama's boy, okay, mom.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
She throws it on him.
So
Aren't you
throw-
cold?
just do what I say.
Go
Do
in
what
there
I
and give your
say.
dad some soup.
Do-
He's hungry.
Yeah, take us to your dad.
I think she told him.
But it also kind of reminds me how King Solomon ended up becoming king.
Mm.
Yeah, King David promised that Solomon would be king, but his older brother assumed the throne.
Mm-hmm.
And then his mom told Solomon to do this, that, and the other, and then to get that promise from King David.
Mm.
So that kind of just made me think the parallel.
Well, yeah, it's fun. It's kind of amazing to think about. Like, I don't know how to phrase it, but you know how Abraham was supposed to have a son. Sarah said, "Why don't you sleep with my concubine?" You know, so she's like stepping in and doing something to make this happen. You know, Rebecca knows that the younger is going to serve, or the older is going to serve the younger, so she's like stepping in to make these things happen. So it's like, you know, doesn't matter what sex you are, even. It's just God's going to do something.
Yeah.
And so he runs from his brother after stealing his inheritance, and he goes to Laban. And then this is what, I was thinking about it, this is Ocean's 13 now, or Ocean's 12. Or I guess Ocean's 12 was whenever he stole his brother's inheritance. Now this is Ocean's 13 coming on in this story. So he goes to his uncle, Laban, looking for sanctuary, and falls in love with Rachel. And I always wanted to believe that falling in love like he did would be realistic. But after doing so, I don't know if 7 years I could just say, yeah, I'm going to work. Because I'm so lazy. You know, there's like, it doesn't matter how much I want something sometimes. I'm like, you know what, after a year and a half,
There'll be others.
Yeah.
What can I get for throwing out the trash?
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Yeah, and especially today, we want things so easy. And, you know, they were talking about how why didn't Isaac just take his blessing back? Because words meant so much to them, and to us they mean nothing.
Yeah.
I mean, a pair of lips can say anything. Doesn't mean they're gonna do it. Doesn't mean, you know what I mean? Like, oh yeah, I'll show up and help you move. Okay.
Oh, was that today?
Yeah. So we don't put as much emphasis on words as they did. And in saying that, I wonder how much Esau thought the same way. Words don't matter. No, it's just my birthright. Whatever. Give me that lentil soup. It doesn't really matter.
Well, it seems like almost that Jacob gave it up too. So here he steals it from his brother. But you got to think, steals it from his brother and then runs away. So he's not the Behor anyway now, because now doesn't get to take the land with him. Doesn't say whether he take the other 2/3 of what the inheritance would have been, unless it was just cash. But you also had that double responsibility. Well, he's not there.
Yeah.
So how could he be the Behor? How could he be? So really it's going to cause Esau to have to kind of grow up too.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like he didn't get to have it even though he inherited it.
Yeah.
Because he stole it. It still didn't get to use it because he ran away.
Yeah.
Sure.
And it wasn't like Esau was, begging for food later. He has his own
It wasn't some kind
army.
of it wasn't like this magical gift that he got. It was other than kind of the blessing of God that this is the line that we're going to travel through. But really, he didn't get anything out of it
Yeah.
except for 14 years of hard labor.
Yeah.
That's true. He still had to go and earn it.
Yeah.
And I
He didn't
wonder,
get to steal it then.
I wonder how much of that was punishment.
Yeah, exactly.
It never says that it was punishment, but steals his brother's birthright and then he runs away.
Yeah, there were consequences for his deceptions that he would, later, the whole relationship with Esau, his brother, that he would have to reconcile. So there was some payback. There's been.
Yeah, nowhere do we read that this is God punishing him for this.
Yeah, it doesn't say it.
Nowhere, it doesn't suggest that God rejected Jacob for this.
Mm-hmm.
It's like trying to find the lines, and they're really blurred here
Yeah.
as far as what's right, what's wrong.
What's a blessing and what's
What's a
punishment?
cursing? Sometimes that thing we think is a blessing turns out to be a curse. That car we bought, you got to put insurance on it.
Yeah.
You got to put gas in it constantly.
Oil change.
Oil
And that
change,
high
oil
payment
maintenance.
just isn't as much fun anymore. You kind of beat it up a little bit.
And when you-
You're
when
still
you-
making that high payment.
When you have to choose between rent and car payment, well, I can sleep in the car.
Yeah. When does it come to that?
I've been to that choice before, and it's a rough one.
Not
Yeah.
a fun choice.
Yeah. Wow.
So then he works 7 years for Rachel, gets tricked into marrying Leah, and then he's like, "All right, I'll work another 7 years for the other daughter." And like, I just don't know about 14 years.
Yeah.
I just think God was kind of laughing. It was like, "Oh, got your back.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Think
Yeah.
you're cheating a lie. Ha ha ha."
Or he's just like, how willing are you to? How much are you willing to go through?
How bad do you really want it?
To get
Yeah.
Like you were willing to do all this stuff to become the Behor, to get your inheritance, your brother's inheritance. What are you willing to do now? Like how much can I push you to grow?
Yeah.
Well, you got to think too is that it's not like he showed up with a bunch of money if he had to work.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
If he had a bunch of money, he could have probably just offered it to their dad, and he would have taken it.
Yeah, without a doubt.
He would have showed up. He showed up with nothing. And it was like, okay, if you're going to make a living for my daughter, you're going to have to earn it if you want her hand. I mean, it's not going to. So he didn't show up with anything. So all of that he tried to steal, he got nothing. So it still ended up with his brother anyway.
Yeah. I just wonder, on the wedding night, how do you get in there and not know who it is?
I always wondered that. Wait a minute,
It's
I've
just
been
your-
tricked.
You're,
must
you're
have really been
drunk
dark.
and it's
It
dark.
must have been
and-
really dark.
You blow out all the candles,
Yeah.
and then you wake up in the morning and she's like,
Mhm.
He's like, "Who are you?"
because she's supposedly didn't have
I'm your wife.
straight
And,
eyes.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was
Yeah.
the thing. They made the comment that how unattractive she was.
Yes.
And if she had veils, that
soft
means
eyes.
lazy eye.
But Dad knew that she
Yeah.
wouldn't be able to get married because of that issue,
Right.
and he needed to get her married and
Mm-hmm.
move on with life.
Yeah.
So this was his way of, well, I've got to fulfill this promise to my daughter. I got to make this happen.
It is our
I love
custom.
my daughter. I know she's kind of homely.
But if Abraham had been in that situation, he would have married Leah anyway,
Yeah,
Yeah.
because he was more about doing the right thing,
yeah.
which would have been marrying off the older daughter first. So I don't know.
It's kind of like Esau. Esau was a guy who followed the rules. He just didn't care about his blessing, his inheritance.
Mhm.
You know, and Isaac was about following the rules. You know, my blessing is going to go to the oldest. That's just how it is. That's the rule.
Mhm.
You know, and you know, and so I love it in the podcast where he said they took the birthright from the guy who followed the rule and gave it to the other guy who really had a hunger for it.
Mhm.
You know, and I don't mean to digress and go back to that, but here the same thing is happening. You know, Laban is saying, well, I should marry off my oldest daughter first.
Mhm.
You know, and here he kind of did some really bad trickery here, and I just see the similarities there where there's this understanding the importance of the tradition and the rules, but let's work a way around it to get what I want.
Yeah.
And I just love the scripture in here where it talked about that Jacob loved Rachel. And though he agreed to work for 7 years, it seemed like no time at all because, because he loved her.
Mhm.
You know, so there's a message for some singles out there. You know?
Yeah.
It's
Well-
better wait for the right one. It'll seem like nothing,
I
even
don't
though
have
right now it
14
doesn't.
years.
Well, then you.
Yeah.
Well, then also
Well, better 28 years for the right one then.
that and the idea you got to
Doesn't
work.
matter, I'm
work
done.
for it.
You got to work for it.
When
Yeah.
my two favorite, I call them love stories in the Bible, were Adam and Eve, and then Isaac and Rebecca.
Yeah.
Where were Isaac and Adam? In their fields working.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so you gotta be working towards something. And when I was a youth pastor, I always used to tell teenagers, the guys, there's the things that's going to separate you from all other men, and that's your destiny. And if you're not working towards nothing, then you really got nothing to offer.
Mhm.
You know, so it really comes down to what are you willing to
Right.
put down. You know,
Right.
and love is free. No, it's not.
No.
Yeah.
No, it's
No, it's
not.
not.
Comes
It
with
isn't.
a
No.
14-year price.
Price
No.
of 14 years.
You know,
Yeah.
another thing that kind of stands out is that you had the two different characters of the brothers. One of them was the man's man, the hunter, the gatherer, the getting out there and going fishing and hunting, and then the other one is kind of the mama's boy who stayed home.
Mhm.
And yet God used the mama's boy, which is totally opposite from what the world usually thinks. It's like you have the alpha male going out there hunting and killing and
The Bass Pro Shop guy.
Bass Pro,
Yeah.
my kind of place. And
Yeah.
but he wasn't the alpha male, and I really think that God probably used him more than anything else because his heart was still to love. And where if your heart's hard and all you think about is yourself, you're out there just man's got to kill a deer and drag it home. But I think it is funny though that.
So it makes you think, does it mean in the development of yourself as a man, you got to find a balance between the two?
Good point.
Because if you're the manly man, then you're dense in the head to realize what's going on. Because how did Esau not realize this is going on?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Or you're the far feminine, where you're all about deception and trying to manipulate the situation. Whereas if I'm a balance, then I know where my strength is, and I'm still my eyes are still open to the situation.
Sure.
To where understanding I have a part to play in this, but not to the point where I'm going to try and manipulate the situations. You know.
Good point.
See, like we're more like Esau. He's more like Jacob.
I have red hair though.
I'm like, I got the fur.
I'm just not as.
I got the furry
I'm
arms.
just red.
You know, Stephen brought up a very good point. Because we think of. I remember my spiritual dad studied the Bible with me, he kept saying this over and over. Well, not over and over all the time, but he said it more than once to me, and it stuck with me. He said, back then, and I'm talking about Les Johnson, and anyone who knew Les Johnson, man, he was a manly man. He wasn't that tall, but he's one of those people that, he had authority, and you knew. He just had it. And but he was a man's man, and he said he always had problems with full-time ministry because people always look down on you. It's like, well, what's the matter? Oh, you became a minister? Oh, what? It didn't work out? Or you went into the ministry because you weren't good at anything else. And so there was an implication of a lack of manliness associated with being a preacher.
A mama's boy.
Yeah, well, I don't know about
just
that.
The weakling or the
yeah, he's just
sissy.
it was like you settled.
Yeah.
You couldn't do something important for a living, so you did that. But here's the thing. Jacob valued God's blessing.
Mm-hmm.
Esau didn't.
Yeah.
But Jacob found, and he uses this term a lot. Marty Solomon in the podcast, he used usurpery.
Mm-hmm.
Why did he pick such a usurpious character? And he said it a couple times. So I did what most intellectuals do. You go look it up. Consult, the Oracle. They'll know all Google. And the definition it didn't surprise me, but it brought a little bit of clarity. It was someone who did something illegally, or they had like a less than sincere purpose. It was deception. They used trickery basically to get what they wanted. And I mean, we could argue that, okay, Esau did swear away his birthright because Jacob insisted on it. He said, "Do you really want do you really want my stew? Well, sell me your birthright." He said, "Okay, fine. What good is birthright if I started it? Well, go ahead and swear. Swear it." He made him do it. And he caught him, and also he had some help from Rebecca. But which is another thing. But so you see all this trickery going on, and you're going, wait a minute, how is this? But which just goes to show me that God can use anybody.
Yeah.
No matter what. If he could use, if he could use Jacob, he can use anybody.
Yeah.
But yeah, and you're right though, going back to finish the point, that there needs to be some balance between the two. Yes, we need to be men of God. Yes, we need to be men. But also, we need to have that spiritual side, that calm, that loving, caring, nurturing side. Well, wait a minute, isn't that for women? Well, I always told conversations with some singles, sisters, and I've had this conversation with my daughter. I said, if you're looking for a man to marry, okay, you're going to come across all kinds. You're going to see the big, tough, manly leaders who take charge and they go after things and they get things, and they're like knights and shining. They're willing to go into battle. They're willing to, but look and see how they are among children. See how they treat children. See how they treat older people. See how they treat people who are weak or maybe even sick. Do they have compassion? Because if they don't have compassion for the weak and the sick, he's not going to have compassion for you when you're sick. Or
pregnant.
Yeah. Because if he's a take charge, come on, let's go get this thing guy, he's not going to have time for somebody who's holding him back. So who would you rather marry? Would you rather marry someone who's compassionate, or would you rather marry somebody who's a go-getter and conquer the world kind of guy?
Yeah. When you think about the balance, as religious as it sounds, Jesus was the balance.
Yes.
He was compassionate, loving, tender towards children. But when it came time to throw down, he threw down.
He did.
You know, what would Jesus do?
He
Well,
flipped the tables.
He made a whip and he chased him out of the temple.
Kicking your butt is in the realm
Yep.
of what would Jesus do, you know?
Mhm.
So that's the balance. So it's kind of that.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, sometimes it's hard to find.
It is
Yeah.
because Jesus knew exactly what to do,
Yeah.
when to do it, and how to do it.
Yeah.
We don't always do so well at that.
Yeah.
And the only way we know is the examples we've been shown.
Exactly.
You know, we don't know anything outside.
And
of
our
it.
examples are less than perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like the analogy of you could tell what kind of people, like what kind of a person someone is with a shopping cart. Because there's like nobody's making you put the shopping cart up,
Yeah.
but the people who just leave it by the car, you know what kind of people they
yeah.
are.
Yeah.
I always say that about the guys, people who don't rack their weights in the gym.
Mm-hmm.
You can tell they're
Yeah.
not the good kind.
Right. Exactly. Exactly.
Okay.
So then
Back on
on
course.
track.
after he marries both of them, and then he takes off, and then Laban catches up with him, and then he makes a deal about, I have nothing to give you. So Jacob's like, well, let me work, and I'll take this part of your flock. And I like how they're like saying how Jacob pulled some witchcraft by using sticks and
Divination.
That was-
That was
painting
weird.
That
things.
was weird. What's the science behind
That
that?
Yeah.
was something
Spotted
else.
sheep, striped
It's like,
sheep.
how does this work? Like, that has never made any sense to
If
me.
you was a goat, if you were in goat and livestock, would you try that?
Go out and paint them.
No. Put a colored striped stick in front of them, make them look, and then you get striped sheep or goats.
Yeah.
Or is this another situation where God's putting His hand in it,
Yeah. Making it happen.
making it happen? How I'm going to make it happen?
He went to Home Depot and got a can of spray paint. That's what he did.
Mm.
Yeah.
I went to Egypt Depot.
Mm-hmm.
Egypt.
So after he gets, after he pulls this off, he gets what he wants again, and then, like you said, God must be behind it because I don't know how that works. But then he has to flee. He flees again, and then Laban catches up with him, and because somebody took his idols,
Yes.
Yeah.
and it was Rachel that took his idols. And I like how they say, this is why Abraham was so adamant about Isaac not staying
Yeah.
in his homeland, because he knows how much idols mean to the people there.
Yeah.
He's willing to chase them down to get some idols. It's like, didn't you make these, or did you buy them from somebody?
Make
like,
some more.
they
Was he,
can't.
I'm sure you can get them cheaper on Wish.
Yeah,
was he making idle threats?
yeah. I don't
Idol.
know. Like, it's just.
So it's interesting because when they discussed the idea of not sending Isaac back, one thing I noticed is Israel through their history were notorious for adapting the culture they came into.
Mhm.
So he didn't want Isaac to go back to this culture of idol worship because he would have adapted to the. But that's also kind of how we are today, man. We're
adapting
adapting to Christianity to make it fit. Though I'm not one of those, that I'm gonna beat you up with my Bible culture either.
Yeah.
There's that balance to be sought. But I think that was just an interesting idea. Is that how and then from the outsider view, how can you see God doing all these things, but you're gonna go worship the rock?
Mm-hmm.
It just scrambles the brain to understand why.
Yeah.
Right.
So they get past this idol phase with Rachel, hiding the idol and saying that she was on her time of the month, so they couldn't really check. And then they kind of come to some reconciliation, and he talks about how they break bread together and how people only break bread together when they're reconciled, when they
Yes.
don't have any problems with each other. And I was like just now I was kind of thinking about how You know, every time families get together for like Thanksgiving, they break bread, but then they start having those arguments.
Right.
And then you always
Well,
have
it's just
that.
a
I just
tradition,
got to
you know?
say
Yeah,
something.
yeah. Like
I'm just saying.
somebody starts talking about politics and religion.
Oh,
and then
and so,
Or
man.
that cousin
it's
we all have.
downhill, yeah.
Yeah.
So then they sit down and start to eat together, and they make these, you know,
Covenant.
these covenants with each other. And Jacob, you know, uses God for his side of the covenant.
Yeah.
And then Laban's like, yeah, I don't really like that. Let me use my, you know,
Yeah.
God for this side of it. And I like how they pointed out that one scripture, or that one sentence that says, you know, the God of your father and the God of my father.
Yeah.
You know, it wasn't like the God of our fathers. It was like
'Cause that-
your dad's God and my dad's
Yeah,
God.
that was a clear distinction that there's two different bodies there.
Mm-hmm.
I just thought that was crazy.
Like
His
how-
God, but his God isn't a God, but it's basically by his honor.
Yeah.
You know.
Because Jacob sets up a pillar, and then Laban chooses a heap. Like, what does that mean? Like, a heap of what? Like,
Your
laundry?
God's full of, yeah.
a pile of dirt? Like, it's just... It's almost like Jacob did something for his pillar, and this guy just chooses something that's already there.
Yeah.
You know, like Jacob's setting up something to remember God in this situation, and Laban's just kind of like, oh, there's another thing I can point to say this is
Right.
a God.
Yeah.
And I like how they pointed out how they couldn't even decide on a name for the place. Like, that was funny to me. Like, oh, they're just naming this all over the place.
Right.
Isn't that kind of an oxymoron for?
Jewish American store.
The IDF. Oh, is that Israel Defense?
No, it's you got to think about. It's just like what Israel happened American Idol show.
Yeah, that does sound weird.
Mm-hmm.
Because everything we're talking about right here would be like the opposite.
Well, I mean, when you think about the idols, it's anything that takes God's
Right.
attention you're supposed to give. So it doesn't necessarily have to be a carved stone.
Anything you put before God.
It could be your job. It could be your friends. It could be your significant other,
A heap.
Sure.
or that heap of laundry that never seems to go away. But and it's sometimes it's easy to not realize, hey, I'm creating an idol here.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and
Yeah, one thing that I really realized was idol worship was, this past election.
oh,
It was just like politics, both left and right. It was like,
my God is more important, is better than your God. I mean, politician.
well, now you can see why Caesar, the Caesars would believe themselves to be gods,
Yeah.
because they're so worshipped
Yeah.
by people. And like, literally, there hasn't been a president that's come to my house and done something for me.
Well, that's true.
God has done so much in my life.
Right.
There's no way I could put a man over
Yeah.
God because of what he's done for me.
Right.
Yeah.
And so they come back around to, the question in the beginning is, why did God choose Jacob? And they talk about the chutzpah and the fire in his belly. And I looked up chutzpah just to see what, somebody defined it as. It says the quality of audacity for good or for bad. It derives from the Hebrew word chutzpah, meaning insolence, cheek, or audacity. So I just thought it was funny how,
It sounds like Jacob.
it's insolence and audacity.
Wow.
They're good or bad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it went on to, become American English to have a broader meaning. It says, meaning the amount of courage, mettle, or ardor that an individual has, particularly in business. So,
Yeah.
I mean, if you were thinking about, there's no rules in business, it's like, yeah, Jacob's just doing business, man.
Yeah.
He's just
He's getting
a
ahead.
shrewd businessman.
Yeah.
Sometimes you make some good deals. Sometimes it takes 14 years for the deal to be finished.
Well, there's a saying I remember here, and it's overnight success takes 15 years.
Mm.
So overnight success to get laid was 14 years. But it really makes me think about the idea of how bad did he want it. And when you think about everything he went through, and it kind of, it makes me think of things like, how bad do I want this relationship with God? People always say, I want to trust God, but they're not willing to do anything. They're not reading books. They're not spending time in the Word. They're not, if it's raining, I'm not going to go to church. Or, my internet connection wasn't working, so I didn't want to use my dad on my phone to watch the service.
You joke about that. You said, if it's raining, I'm not going to church.
But I know. People will make that excuse.
I spent, 3 years in Virgin Islands, and people spend a lot of money on their hair, and it would rain a lot. Not a lot, but when it did rain, actually in the Virgin Islands, if it was raining, that was a legitimate excuse to be late for work if you were a government employee. I'm serious.
Because it all came down at once.
Yeah. And sometimes it's. I say that we're laughing at it, but there are legitimate reasons for that. If you've ever lived in St. Thomas, there's not a level piece of ground anywhere, and there are some hills that I remember in a car. I tried going up it, and the tires just kept slipping. They weren't going anywhere. The roads were terrible. The roads were steep, and they don't exactly follow the same engineering standards like we do here. Some turns were so steep that, and I learned this early on. I wondered why I was driving with another brother, and he'd go around the curve and he'd honk the horn. I go, that's odd. What do you do that for? He says, well, you have to do that here because you got to let somebody know that you're coming because the turns are so steep and the roads are so narrow. You don't want to hit head on. And so if somebody hears you honk, you better honk. And then you better be ready to somebody better figure out how we're gonna pass each other here. And so sometimes when it rains, it was a good excuse to be late or not go to work or even go to church sometimes. So I digress, but we had time to kill. Sorry about that.
My point was
that was good for about 10 minutes almost.
Well, my point was, like, how bad do we want to get to know this God?
Right.
Some people, I don't want to say that term, but some people use the idea, you've heard the song, there's dust on the Bible.
Yeah.
If there's dust on your Bible, that means you know nothing of God.
Right.
And you shouldn't let your Bible grow dust. I can't.
You should wear it out.
One of the reasons I started this study of what I believe and why I believe it, because there's these ideas I've had that I've never really sought out for myself. I was content to be taught these things and never questioned. So in this pursuit of what it is I truly believe, why do I believe it? Wasn't this idea of rebellion, it wasn't this idea to prove that these ideas are wrong, but to make these ideas personal. Because until God's a personal God, He's just a God. He's not taking it serious. So anything He says you don't take serious, and then you despise your birthright.
Right.
And then you find yourself going through these problems and wonder where's God in all this? And if God was real, why would bad things happen?
Sure.
But if you don't have a real relationship with God, then you'll never understand that.
Yeah.
So how bad do I want to get to know God, get close to God? If there are things in my life that I'm wanting to know, some direction, then it might be a good idea to get to know the one who does know the way I'm supposed to go. Even to the point that, am I willing to go through the same pains I did before I knew Him, just to get to know Him again?
Yeah.
Am I really willing to go through all that again, just to get to that point again?
Yeah.
Wow.
And to be honest, I've been in that point for a couple of years. Yeah, I'm willing to go through it again.
That's
I'll
a good
do it
answer.
again. Because that place with God is just this amazing place. It doesn't make everything sunshine and roses, but it makes it endurable, and it gives meaning to what I'm going through.
Exactly.
And so, I don't know if y'all know who Kenneth Hagin is. He was one of the first of the faith movement, and he would say he would pray one time, Lord, I want to get more of you. While he was reading this every morning, he'd read the newspaper. Lord, how can I get close to you?
Wow.
And God spoke to him, how much time are you spending with that paper in the morning?
Wow.
So how bad do we want it? That's the one God's wanting to use. That's the one God's willing to show Himself, those who are seeking.
Wow.
So that was one of the biggest takeaways from this whole episode here was how bad do I want it? Are we willing to give up?
And I think that was the biggest difference between Jacob and Esau too, is I think Jacob wanted a relationship with God, even though he made a lot of mistakes. But he was still willing to keep fighting for that relationship and still speak to God, where I don't think it ever said that Esau did.
Yeah.
So I think that is kind of the bigger thing, is even when you're messing up, God's still there with you. As long as you're there with him and know that, and you're still seeking him. Like I'd heard it said that the Bible is, every annual year, is the #1 top selling book in the world. But it's also the #1 least read book in the world every year.
That's crazy. And you hear these stories about people in China having, one page in the Bible that they read.
So, and I get to some of it. It is hard to understand. It's hard to put together. It's hard. It's a puzzle, but it's a lifelong journey. But it's that pursuit of continually wanting to seek God, even when things don't make sense, and still keep searching and still keep trying to change, hey, I see that I'm messing up in this area. I think it's that heart, that the willingness to change and really look up and say, okay, what do I do now? How do I change this?
Yeah, I think it's especially when it doesn't make sense, because when you're doing things that don't make sense, that means you really love them. Because it doesn't make sense to work for one for 7 years, but he did it anyway.
That's proof he loved.
And one thing they, didn't go deep into was Jacob's dream, but they did talk about where it was that he had the dream. It was in the middle of nowhere.
It's right. That's where I was trying to find. Yeah.
And it was talking about how
God
was in this place.
And he slept on a rock. And he had that dream. And then he took that rock and he built an altar. But
he had the first hairband.
So you got 2 daughters. So when the guy comes along, you're going to make him work 7 years?
Yeah. 7 years, you're going to marry Maggie.
7 years, you work around this house, do what I tell you.
You have to kiss the barrel of my shotgun first.
I like 7 years of work.
That's a good idea.
Clean my house for 7 years.
Yes.
Well, before you can get her phone number, my car needs a good wash.
Yeah.
Let's get a start.
Here's a
start building
lawnmower.
up some credit here.
So here's the deal. You got to take her last name. Since I don't have any sons, you got to take her last name. Yeah, I really wish they'd gone into that dream more in depth, and I didn't really look into it a whole lot. There's so much that comes from his dream, because everybody thinks about Jacob's Ladder.
Sure.
Yeah.
There's a movie called Jacob's Ladder. It has nothing to do with Jacob's
Yeah.
Ladder, but
Right.
That's how popular his dream was. Is that
And that was the place where they built the temple.
mm,
Because that's where the angels were kind of, descending out of heaven to earth.
It was about the business.
Earth into heaven.
and so it's like, what did he find out from that dream?
Well, that God is worth it.
Yeah.
God is worth it. All the suffering.
Yeah,
And we sign up to be a Christian, to follow God, because our life was in the pit, and it was messy, and it was terrible, and it was, because look at how I messed it up, and it wasn't fun, it wasn't great, it was miserable, and no, we don't want that. But then when I became a disciple, I figured, oh wow, now that I'm a disciple, now the blessings, they're just woof. Go ahead, I'm ready. Let's bring them on. No, God had another plan. He said, no, you're not ready yet. I think you need to build some character. And I know what you want, but before you do that, you're gonna detail cars. You're gonna work for a construction company.
Yeah.
You're going to work 2 jobs one day, one night, and you're barely going to make ends meet. In fact, you add it up and do the math, you're not making ends meet, but somehow you did. That was me. And because you work towards it, like Stephen was saying, and there's some things that come through the suffering that we're not going to get any other way. It's just not going to happen. In fact, if we really follow Jesus, well, he was a man of sorrows and suffering, and it says that Jesus was made perfect in suffering. So if you're going to avoid suffering, there's some problems with
You're not
that.
going to be like Jesus.
That's right. That's right. You're going to be missing something.
That's what was driving me crazy about what you said about some guys picking on Les about, going into preaching. It's like, oh, you couldn't do anything else. Like, that's all Jesus did.
That's right.
Can we follow this guy? Like,
Well, that's the worldly model.
that's true.
Yeah.
That's the worldly model. But Les was a great example that no, he broke that mold. Because he did look around at some of his other fellow preachers. They wore glasses, they were geeks, and he couldn't really see them doing anything else. But yeah, that's kind of the way the world looks at you. And I heard that too. Like somebody else said that it's like you go to like a Christmas party or whatever, or a reunion, and you start, oh hey, yeah. So what do you do? And somebody's, oh, I'm a businessman and entrepreneur, and I own these companies. And I said, what about you? Oh, well, I'm a preacher. He says, didn't work out, did it?
Well, now that just sounds like Facebook.
Exactly. Yeah.
Never mind the reunion. It's just Facebook every day.
Well, Roddy shared that with me. He said it's always tough when he goes to share his faith and stuff, or
Sure.
it's to go out and hang out with people. He says, like, I just want to hang out with them and be friends with them. But as soon as they find out that I'm a preacher,
Yeah.
they go into Christian mode.
Mhm.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it just immediately
The
just kills
resume.
the conversation. It kills the relationship.
Yeah.
And he said I just,
Yeah.
they won't
can't-
even let me be their friend.
Right. To be real.
Because
Yeah.
they just go full mode religious on you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he said, that's the hardest part for him, because it's like, because he's not your typical preacher. He likes hunting and fishing and riding in pickups, and he's an old country boy.
Yep.
Mhm.
He is.
And so, that's, you can love God and still have a good time,
Yes, you can.
and be a man's man.
Yes, you
And
can.
Roddy is a man's man,
Yep.
and yet he has an incredible heart for God. So, to think about, but it is tough to build a relationship with someone who is not in the church with somebody, because immediately when they hear that you're a preacher, they go into religious mode.
Sure.
Well, you didn't have to be a preacher for that.
I know.
No.
You
For
just
him, it's
share your faith at work, and then all of a
That's
sudden
right.
people
Yeah.
like that.
That's right. And my second cousin's third brother, had a good friend who was a preacher. So,
Or that preacher on TV
right.
did this, so all preachers are that way.
Lump them all together.
Yeah. So a banker robs, embezzles from a bank, but not all bankers are that way.
Mm-hmm.
Mary doesn't look like Tammy Faye when she cries.
We won't go there.
All right.
I'm glad we didn't.
That's
I'm
it
sure
for this
glad.
week. Next week is Grappling with God Part 2.
Well,
and
I
then
can't
we're
wait for that.
done
That's one of my
until
favorite stories.
January. And that's Into the Pit. And then the one after that is Out of the Pit, I think. So
Hello.
join us next week.
Don't forget to like and share.
Hello.
Like a chair. Like a chair.
In the pits.